Good morning, Patriots. How are we doing today? It is Monday morning. I hope everybody had a good weekend. And here we go, y'all. I had plans to do a show this morning that was going to be a little more esoteric, a little more philosophical, but then Zelensky just had to go and bomb Russia. Now, we're going to read this article and talk about what happened over the weekend, but let's get a little bit of context in here. We are in the middle of the U.S. and Russia and Ukraine ostensibly engaged in peace talks, trying to wrap up this insane conflict between Russia and the Ukraine. So let me give you a quick summary. Joe Biden shut down American energy independence intentionally, took the money from the Keystone XL pipeline, funneled it into the I always forget the name of the other pipeline. The frickin' it starts with an N. The the German pipeline. Um, Essentially funneling money directly to Russia. Uh, Basically, he funded the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Biden funded the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And then after the funding was in place, there was the whole Afghanistan debacle. And Nord Stream, thank you, Aaron, the Nord Stream pipeline. He funneled all the money out of the Keystone XL pipeline, which was a boon for American industry, American job creation, and American energy independence, and funneled all that money into the Nord Stream pipeline to basically enable additional fuel production and energy production in the Eastern Bloc, in the Eastern European bloc, which you're talking Germany, Russia, etc. And then between the Afghanistan debacle and a few other major policy missteps, essentially he signaled to Putin, "Hey, you can do whatever you want, and there will be no consequences whatsoever." At the same time that's going on, this comedian who plays the piano with his penis on television, Volodymyr Zelensky, who, let's be real, he is an American. He is an American puppet. He was installed uh, in Ukraine through many of the same illegitimate and specious machinations that put Hunter Biden on the board of Burisma. The Bidens are knuckles deep in Ukrainian corruption and money laundering, and they created this mess intentionally. Now, the Donald is back in office and has been attempting to negotiate peace and get that whole thing spun down. The powers that be don't want it spun down. Zelensky does not want this war to end. He does not want this conflict to terminate. Right? We all saw the thing where the Donald brought Zelensky to the White House. Zelensky shows up in this bizarre sweatsuit, like he's trying to maintain this media image of being some kind of tough guy. Zelensky is a comedian who plays the piano with his penis. And now he's a billionaire because he is the face of American Democrat money laundering in Europe. Pitt Danny says the Fetterman look. Yeah, exactly. So he comes into the White House with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And by all accounts, up until the point that he gets into the White House for that meeting, the deal is basically all but done. The U.S. is going to take a deal with Ukraine for access to Ukrainian rare earth mineral rights. Everybody's going to be making actual money, not just laundering U.S. tax dollars into Zelensky's pocket. right? And it looked like a pretty good deal. And Zelensky came into the White House with a plan to sabotage the deal. He walked in there, got on, and he thought he was going to get on television and bully or extort Donald Trump into giving him something else, something more, into changing the deal. I can't even imagine what was running through this idiot's head. Right, you're going to go onto American soil and attempt to strong arm and extort the American president when your country is getting its ass kicked so badly by Russia that you are now talking about extending your draft to conscript men over the age of 55 and under the age of 20 because you're running out of military aged bodies to stuff into the meat grinder. That's who Zelensky is. Now, I'll give him this on this move. It was a bold move. Oh, it's quite a clever use of the technology. But Zelensky doesn't want the war to end. He wants the gravy train to keep running right into his pocket. He is actually opposed to peace. Russia invading the Ukraine was Zelensky's wet dream. Now, remember, it's hard to talk about what a shit sack Zelensky is without sounding like you're making a full-throated defense of Putin and basically justifying the whole invasion. But the fact is that Zelensky kept playing these tiptoe games with, well, maybe I'll join the UN, maybe I won't, or NATO, maybe I'll join NATO, maybe I won't. He kept sitting on the fence and playing this game where he keeps playing fuck games over whether or not he's going to pull the trigger on joining a treaty alliance and operating under the assumption that he basically gets to have all the benefits of being a member state without paying the contributions, right? And we already have a problem. We already have a problem with NATO being underfunded by the various member states. America is footing the bill. We've talked about this many times on the show before. Everywhere in the world that there is a strong socialist state, which, by the way, outside of the United States is everywhere in the world, it is able to do that precisely because the United States is subsidizing that activity. We're either sending direct foreign aid and just basically giving their governments money directly for those purposes, or their military operations and the security of their trade operations are only extant and guaranteed by U.S. military monetary expenditure. The entire planet right now is subsidized by American taxpayer dollars. And that's without having the discussion about the billions upon billions of dollars that are being laundered through these various NGOs and foreign government and corrupt kleptocrat autarchs globally. The Russo-Ukraine war was Zelensky's wet dream, and he does not want it to end. That's why, in the middle of peace talks, as it looks like we're actually approaching a deal, despite Zelensky's earlier attempts, obvious, blatant earlier attempts to sabotage any peace deals made, any peace deals offered. Here we are on the verge of maybe getting a ceasefire in place and actually moving toward peace talks and ending this Russo-Ukrainian conflict. And Zelensky goes and pokes the bear, so to speak. Right? So Zelensky boasts of absolutely brilliant longest range strikes while Kremlin confirms terrorist attacks. And you know what? In all fairness to both sides, those are both reasonable characterizations of the incident. The Ukraine probably rightly believes that what they did was an intelligent military strike. And if it were not for all the context around the fact that reports say that we've been approaching a peace deal, I would agree with that. If it were just a straight hot conflict with no end in sight, then I would absolutely agree that this was a brilliant strategic move. I'd even go so far as to call it an intelligent tactical maneuver. But this feels a hell of a lot like you're watching two players playing chess, and the guy that is one move away from putting checkmate on the opponent decides to flip the table and shit on the board because, well, he's a pigeon and that's how they play. Zelensky is not a good guy. Pitt Danny says there can be two bad guys, maybe three. While Biden was still in office in the U.S., I said over and over again, guys, there are no good guys in this conflict. There are no good guys. There are no heroes in this war. Zelensky's a bad guy. Biden was a bad guy. Putin's a bad guy. Now, for his part, Donald Trump, it does look like Donald Trump is very much interested in doing business and making money rather than conducting war, which, don't get it twisted. I love a good war, but this is not a good war. There are no good guys in this conflict. But Zelensky, not Ukraine, Zelensky personally is making a shitload of money, and that stops as soon as we make peace with Russia and shut down this conflict. Pitt Danny says the problem is the harder they hit Russia, the closer we get to nuclear war. Yes and no. Yes, that's absolutely true, with one caveat exception in this particular case, because, and we'll read the article now, what Zelensky has done does actually dramatically hinder Russia's nuclear capability. So Zelensky boasts of absolutely brilliant longest range strikes while Kremlin confirms terrorist attack. Ukraine's President Zelensky is spiking the football and poking the Russian bear, or rather jabbing it pretty hard, as he issued a statement calling Sunday's massive drone attack on Russian territory, which destroyed strategic bombers, an absolutely brilliant result. So what they did is they basically wiped out somewhere around 40% of Russia's long-range nuclear weapon delivery bombers, right? Aircraft. They snuck in with an army of drone swarm tactics and used kamikaze drones to blow up Russian aircraft in Russia. It's a clever maneuver, and I would applaud it, almost as much as I applauded the exploding pagers that Israel hit Hamas with, Hamas. But kind of, you pick your time. This is something that would have been a great idea a year ago, but why antagonize the opposition in the middle of peace talks? Hey, we want a ceasefire. We want to bang, 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 bang. I thought you wanted a ceasefire. Well, yeah, but we don't have one yet. Bang, 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 bang. So Russia's military has since issued the official statement confirming the scope of the massive drone swarm strikes. Military airfields across Russia have been attacked in a series of kamikaze drone strikes, the country's defense minister reported on Sunday, blaming the incidents on Kiev. Most of the strikes were successfully repelled, with some resulting in material damage, it added. Airfields were targeted in the Murmansk region in the country's north, in Ivanovo and Ryazan regions in central Russia, as well as the Irkutsk region in Siberia and Amur region in the Far East, the ministry said. Now, that right there, that they were able to deploy these drone swarms and make attacks in that many regions that are that disparately dispersed is impressive, right? General study strategy, good general study tactics, great general study logistics. That is a logistical masterstroke. I'll give it to them. Some of the culprits behind the attacks have been detained, the ministry said, without revealing the number of those arrested or their identities. The Russian military also said that the Kiev regime was, was ultimately responsible for the strikes, which they described as terrorist attacks. Now, in fairness, this right here, that's some strong propaganda language, referring to them as terrorist attacks. That's kind of when I hear the term terrorist attacks, I tend to think of things like the Twin Towers, the love trucks, those kind of incidents. If I've got a terrorist organization like, say, the Taliban blows up a bunch of soldiers in Afghanistan, okay, hold on. Yes, it's bad. And yes, because you killed a bunch of soldiers, I am absolutely interested in seeing all of your bodies stacked. Right? You come at my gate with a vehicle-borne IED, and I lose 2 privates, and you best believe I will burn your fucking cities to the ground. I know. I've seen me do it. But, in the war zone, in the conduct of ongoing war, to use loaded language like terrorist attack is a little disingenuous. Right? The other side of that, however, I will say is, while it is Russia that's at war with Ukraine, and this is the closest I can give to a little kind of generous credit to the use of that language in this context, the bulk of the Russo-Ukraine war is happening in Ukraine, not in Russia. So the actual conflict zone is in Ukraine. And, so it would be unfair, it would be disingenuous for me to ignore that fact. And so, parts of Russia are were still relatively quite safe. And, I'll give them this. If Ukraine wants to have any chance of actually winning the war, since they clearly don't want to negotiate a ceasefire, then they're going to have to start fighting the war. They're going to have to start making inroads into enemy territory and fighting the war instead of just holding a defensive position. That said, Ukraine has depleted its resources to such an extraordinary extent over the course of this conflict. What's it been, 3 years now? That their ability to project military power has become extremely limited, and that is largely their own fault. We actually covered this when it first started opening up. We talked about it on a Firearms Friday, because one of the first things that happened is when the Russians first started moving in, there was a sudden realization that, oh, wow, the Ukrainian military is absolutely not up to dealing with this. And so Zelensky started a program to arm the civilian population. Then, of course, we covered that here on BFM, because Second Amendment, if, and this is a big if, because y'all invading the United States, that's a whole complicated non-starter. But if you happen to have a foreign hostile invader land on our shores, and I'm not talking about the slow infiltrating invasion that's happening across the southern border where you're sneaking in onesies and twosies. I'm talking about you have China or the like attempt something like the landing at Normandy, off Savannah Beach. There's not going to be any conversation about, oh my God, we don't have enough soldiers. We need to arm the population quick. Figure out a way to get guns into the hands of civilians. That conversation doesn't happen, because here you've got old rednecks like me that'll just grab their personal rifle, and move out, right? You tell me there's communists coming up the shore on Savannah Beach. I will be there in 3.5 hours and loaded for bear. And I'm real good at range. And I'm one of several million in this country that's like that. So, of course, we discussed the Zelensky plan to arm the civilians. We're like, yo, if you weren't a bunch of communists that disarmed your citizens, you'd be that much closer. And by that much closer, I mean months closer to putting bullets in bad guys. Right? Aaron Olson says, just wait till we strap some rifles on a drone. Funny story. So anyway, the big chunk for here, like I said, the big takeaway here, here's a map that shows where the individual strikes happen. And like I said, they're dispersed all over the place, all across Russia. Because Russia, the landmass of Russia, while it's not as populous as the United States, the landmass is gigantic. According to Ukraine intelligence officials cited by CBS News, the aircraft destroyed included Tu-95Ms and Tu-22M3 bombers, which play a central role in Russia's strategic and nuclear-capable long-range aviation forces. Maybe I may have scrolled past it. Oh, there it is. Multiple U.S. media outlets, including Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CBS News, independently confirmed the Ukrainian drone swarm operations targeted and destroyed approximately 40 Russian military aircraft across 4 air bases. So that was, maybe I got confused. They said approximately 40. I thought there was something about it being like 40% of their long-range bombers. But it is a huge blow. So, as we're looking at this is a major maneuver by Ukraine, which will absolutely put Russia. We're going to be hearing about this story for days, and by the end of the day today, I could just about guarantee we will have a statement from Putin about how this was an unforgivable trespass. This was a completely unnecessary and unreasonable escalation of the temperature of the current operational tempo, and that Russia is preparing some kind of retaliatory strike. This absolutely moves us closer to a nuclear war. And let's be clear, if Russia decides to glass the Ukraine, that is the end of the conflict. Right? The current U.S. interest, it's interesting to look at what happened as a result of the last election. The American interest in Ukraine and funding the Ukraine war was blatant, pure and simple money laundering. It's the only reason the U.S. was involved in Ukraine at all. And the only reason that they were able to get involved, right? Donald Trump is the first U.S. president in 35 years. Well, no, let me rephrase. He's the first U.S. president since Putin took office, and Putin's been the president off and on, but essentially maintaining consistent unbroken power since the early 90s. And under every president that we've had since Putin took office, Putin has expanded Russia by moving into, Crimea. He moves in and annexes some territory, conquers some land, takes over another country, brings it back into the fold. He's trying to rebuild the Soviet bloc that existed prior to the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. right? So under every single president, U.S. president that we've had since Putin was was elected was elected president in Russia, he's taken territory, with one exception, under Donald Trump's first term. Donald Trump, right, and Putin has even talked about it. While Donald Trump was president, the possibility that he would actually deploy something like a Moab or maybe even go to the new nuclear option was not there was never a 0% chance. Every other president we've had, foreign military intelligence has assessed that there's just zero chance that they break out mass destruction and really hammer us, right? The opinion of the Russian intelligence apparatus has been zero chance of substantial retaliation from the United States, no matter what we do, as long as we don't directly attack U.S. installations. Except while Donald Trump was in office, his first term, and Putin sat down and shut up. So the involvement in Ukraine, Biden was setting that up for a while before he took office. The Biden family and the Democrat criminal apparatus. That's why you saw Hunter Biden flying around the world, picking up bags of cash, sitting on the board of Burisma, right? Getting the U.S. government in bed with corrupt Ukrainian oligarchs and doing business with basically, outright gangsters, open, Eastern European bloc organized crime, Ukrainian mafia types. And then Biden came in and actively, like I explained earlier, shutting down the pipeline, shoveling money over to a different pipeline, and then making specific bad policy decisions, giving public signals to the weakness of the American institution. And it didn't help that we were running the "let me talk about my two mommies" Army recruiting ads to just really let Russia know we are not a serious military power anymore, because we've neglected our military and allowed it to deteriorate and become less than what it was, but because under the reins of Democrat control, we have chosen to neuter our military, our capability, and our ability to maintain the significant op tempo that was required to prosecute multiple wars around the globe over the last 25 years. Created that situation. And then Zelensky, who is obviously a puppet of the Democrat Party, did all his saber rattling, wishy-washy, maybe I will, maybe I won't bullshit to antagonize Putin and to put Putin in a position where he had to say, I cannot strategically, for purposes of national security, afford to have a NATO member state on my immediate western border. It is not an option. Can't do it. No. They created that problem. Donald Trump came into office and he didn't solve it on day one. And I don't think any of us reasonably expected that he could. It was a great political talking point for the campaign, but they were no shit sitting down at the table and having discussions. And as big a stink as the lefty media made about it, Donald Trump going and negotiating with Putin on Ukraine's behalf without Ukraine represented at the table was, I think, a very clear signal to the world that, yeah, the new administration clearly understands that Zelensky is not a good faith actor in this, has always been a puppet of the illegitimacy of the left, of the Democrat Party, and the policy of Ukraine on the entire conflict topic is completely navigated and negotiated based on Zelensky's personal interest and personal gain. So there isn't going to be a resolution in the Russo-Ukraine conflict that includes Volodymyr Zelensky, because his personal interest is his primary driving policy decision-making parameter. So if there's going to be an end to the conflict, it will either be the absolute destruction and subjugation of Ukraine by Russia, or a deal between Russia and the United States that essentially necessarily includes deposing Zelensky and the U.S. taking some substantial commercial or strategic interest in Ukraine in order to secure it for American interests. Because right now, Ukraine has no value for us. The Ukraine has no value remaining for the American people under the current circumstances. Zelensky needs to make a deal that makes Ukraine a legitimate economic interest for the United States, and then the whole problem is over. But a big part of why Zelensky's in trouble right now, Zelensky is the fat kid on the playground. And he's on a playground where there's a lot of big, strong guys that are nice guys that are willing to go and stand up for him. And the bully comes over. Bully starts pushing him and telling him he wants his lunch money, right? And a couple of nice guys come over to help him out. And Zelensky just turns around and says, "Man, fuck you. I can do it myself." All right. Good luck. I mean, I step up for a little guy and take one on the chin and throw a few haymakers and solve a problem. But if he's going to piss on my boots while I'm doing it, good luck. I'm going to go get a cheeseburger. That's another one, I know I've seen me do it. Right? And Zelensky has decided to make his bed. Props. Big move, big blow. And if I'm being honest, there is American interest here because one of our foreign adversaries, Russia, has just suffered a significant blow. Aaron Olson points out that it is about 40% of the bombers. So, Russia has just suffered a significant blow to its war footing and its capacity to engage it, basically to project military power. That's a good thing for the U.S. That means that in all future dealings, the U.S. is in a better negotiating position with Russia. For the Ukraine, you took out 40% of Putin's nuclear strike capability, but you didn't take out 100%. And about 1% of his capacity to project nuclear power is all the problem Ukraine needs to cease existing. So they might have just picked a fight that they're about to lose real hard, and they may be about to lose it real fast. That I cannot predict for sure, because now my expectation is that Putin is not going to launch a nuclear strike immediately in this instance, precisely because while we don't actually have a legitimate U.S. interest in Ukraine currently. There is the potential for one, and I think that Donald is interested enough in developing that potential economic interest that taking measures to prevent the destruction of that potential value, that won't be off the table, right? So people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, it's not my cornfield. You shouldn't burn it down. That's stupid. Or, wait. I'd like to buy that cornfield before you burn it down. Well, that's another matter altogether. So we can we'll be watching this one closely. Hopefully, there will be nothing to report on it tomorrow. Everything will just blow over. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think nuclear retaliation is what's going to hit us either. But I guarantee Putin is going to have something to say about this sooner rather than later. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the channel. Y'all, we almost hit it this morning. We almost hit the mark this morning for some free membership giveaways, but we didn't quite get there. So y'all do me a favor, go like, share, and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed on Rumble, especially, get over to Rumble and join us there. But share. Send it out on Twitter, wherever you can. X. Anywhere you can share it. Share the show. Encourage people to watch. Let's build this thing, and because you got the big voices out there like Steven Crowder, Tim Pool, and all those guys. They do a great job. They do a great job covering the news and everything. They are not professional military intelligence analysts, and quite frankly, they're a little squishy, right? I like Crowder generally. He leans a little to the left for my taste on some things. So, little squishy, solid, smart, and definitely a great content producer. But y'all come back here for the more rigid right take. So y'all be safe out there, guys. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.